Welcome to What We Couldn't Say on Sunday, the podcast where we dive deeper into the thoughts, reflections, and messages that couldn't make it into Sunday's sermon. Whether it's a story left untold, a lesson needing more time, or a question left unanswered, this is the space where we can explore the faith journey together in a deeper, more personal way. I'm your host, Seth. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back. We are wrapping up our series, To the Future. This is Seth Wenger. I'm here with Pastor Kyle Reynolds, coming off of this To the Future series, which if you were listening back to the podcast a few weeks ago, we unpacked what To the Future even really means as a church for us and the history of that. So I encourage you to go back and listen to week 1 of this To the Future series just to get some more context. But Kyle, coming off of this year, To the Future, how did that series sit 2024 overall for you?
That's a great question. And sorry, I apologize for my voice. I have some laryngitis, I guess, but so I'm going to sound like I'm going through puberty the whole podcast. I assure you I'm not.
Authenticity.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I feel like every year we get better at telling our own story. And I think every time you as an individual tell your story or why you were here, how you got here, why you believe what you believe, you get better at it too. And so I think we just keep getting better. And that's the exciting part, is why we continue to do it, is to continue to tell our story better. This year, it just felt more refined, a little bit more cohesive, and in some ways, more clear. And now, I don't mean to say that I don't have criticisms or ways in which I wish we could have done better, but I think we definitely have gotten better at telling our story.
Especially since, we're in a big campaign cycle right now. Whenever you're listening to this right now, it's obviously November 2024, but we're in a big capital campaign project to pay off the debt. And man, to be able to present those numbers to people almost, what are we, 6 months in?
6 months in.
So halfway through, and to be able to hit those numbers of how much raised, 1 point.
Yeah, 1.3, 62% of the goal.
Yeah. It's still for people to get that back on their radar to go, oh yeah, that's happening, first of all, but B, we're that close. Like, man, we hit the first of the year here. It's going to be crazy to see that close out. And man, yeah, it's been fun to see sometimes those numbers. And that was week 1 when, right, you gave, or was it week 2?
No, it was actually week 3.
Was it? Yeah, that's right. It was
week 3.
Wow. The weeks are blurring together here. But yeah, just that quarterly update for us as a church to celebrate and see God accelerate, which is a phrase that's becoming more and more popular around here. But yeah, it was a good, like you said, being able to tell our story. And when you said that, it made me think like it's helping us define really more and more the things that are important: faith, family, freedom, future, and how that really takes root over time versus you can say a mission statement and they're a dime a dozen, but to see it root in a community is really cool too. Well,
and the hope is that our church can tell our story. It's not just those who get a paycheck or those who labor for it, but the church can not only embody it, but share it as well.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And I think we're seeing that with just a lot of people saying like, I'm inviting people, or, hey, I've been here. I've been talking with some of the people who've been volunteering recently of hearing, man, this has been so life-giving for them. And man, that to me, it's not about like, oh, you guys did a great job, or, oh, this was cool. It's, man, this is life-giving and changing my family, and seeing that type of transformation is what it's about. It's really just about people turning their life over to Christ and Him transforming it. So any specifically from this weekend, anything that people mentioned or had questions about with your message?
Not really. I mean, I just think that it was an appropriate, the weather in Cleveland is always fickle, especially in this time of year. It just felt appropriate for the season we're in. I mean, the cold is upon us. Winter's upon us. We just a few days ago or a week ago had early snow. And we have some folks that just moved here from Florida, from Texas. I mean, just several different people. And we're freaking out like, oh my gosh, we got pummeled with snow. And I'm like, no, we didn't. We got a dusting.
Yeah.
Wait till winter when it really hits. But it's just that idea of like one season is closing. The fall is closing and we're stepping into the winter season. And so it just felt like a very fitting close to our series, but also close to the fall season as we step into the winter and more specifically the Christmas season.
And I like that you use that phrase on Sunday, is a change of season, but how did you say, I'm trying to find your note here. what do you not want to carry over into the next season? What needs to die in this season to move forward?
And it's a sermon illustration that I'm going to use in January for our series that we're rolling out on kind of faith formation. And so I tried everything I could to not say it. So every service was a different variation. The most masterful one was 11:30 when I was like, it's not clear. I got to make it clear. But the best I've ever heard, and this is Pastor Russell Johnson said it this way. He said, baggage is what you carry from your past. And so all of us, we're carrying from things from us from this last season that we may not even realize we're carrying. We may not intend to carry, or we might choose that, hey, I don't want to carry this anymore. So you have to inspect that. But luggage is what you pack for the future you want, for the things that you desire to experience. And so I just think that's a beautiful picture of what kind of this series is for us, is we check our bags and we pack our bags for what we want to happen.
Wow. And a perfect time to do that, really, with this season, with Christmas coming and all of that. And yeah, what are things that didn't make it for Sunday for you that you wish you could have lingered on?
Well, I got through everything as far as the content of the scriptures. I think there's so much in that, though, that I could have said more. I mean, the one area that I didn't press into or breezed over, and I wanted to press in more just because of my own story, but also because we all have it, and unfortunately the church doesn't know how to talk about it. We've all have church hurt. Like what happens when other followers of Christ hurt us? And what does it do to our souls? What does it do to our armor? The Lord says we have to put on the armor of God, but some of us have dented, chinked up armor. It's been through battle, and so it looks war torn. And so I just think I can't imagine Paul sitting in a prison cell confessing that these people deserted him, they abandoned them, they chose the things of this world over the things that they fought for, and yet still enduring his purpose, still enduring his responsibility, still enduring to lead and pastor not only the churches, but the people he influenced and impact.
So Churcher, I know you mentioned a little bit about your story in your message, a couple moments where you were working for an organization and you kind of mentioned your own church hurt and the elevator speech, small 1-page magazine article. What can you just give people a little bit more context for not necessarily the nitty gritty, but just a little bit of story and how you got to that place? And obviously God brought you here, again, but just a little bit of context for some of those things you mentioned in passing, like in your story.
Well, I said this and I think I believe it. I'm the poster child of the giving up on the local church. Now, I don't mean that I want to give up on the local church, but I have every reason to give up on the local church. I've been in full-time vocational ministry since 2006. And since 2006, I've worked for 5 organizations. 4 of those organizations, my senior leader, my boss, went through a moral failure. And I'm talking everything from an affair to embezzlement, to lying, to deceit, to church splits. I mean, I have seen it all. And I sometimes wonder, how do I still do it? How do I, and for a long time, I kind of made a vow, because when you get hurt, you immediately go, well, I'm going to do everything I can to protect myself so I don't ever become the monster. I made a vow, I don't want to ever be a senior leader. I don't ever want to be a lead because I don't want to fail people. I don't want to have such high expectations on me that there's a potential to fail. And I had to get over that and really trust God with my calling. And it's I just got to stay at the foot of the cross. But in spite of my entire journey and all these guys failing me, the Lord hasn't failed me. His purpose, his calling, how he's used every one of those, because I don't think that they were intentional. Meaning, I do not think the Lord said, hey, Kyle, I need you to experience all this church hurt because I want to develop you. That's I don't know, that doesn't work for me. Right, I just don't really believe that. But I think he used those scuff ups, those pain points, those trauma-inducing opportunities to set me up in this season to be more like him, to go. The local church is still the hope of the world, and yeah, any expression of the local church on this side of eternity is a human-led, a faulted expression. But that doesn't mean that we should cease the perfection of Christ, should cease choosing to be like Christ. And the thing that I learned from it is, let's just choose to learn each other's expenses. Like we're so worried about hurting people's feelings or well, the truth is too harsh. But no, man, we need to be more honest. Let's learn at each other's expenses. Why did it happen? How did it happen? Where did the accountability fall short? Where did the pressure mount to the point where sin was the option that was taken? Where did the emotional breakdown where we were so hurt that we had to lie and steal or cheat to get through our own pain? Like, those wise journeys is how you actually learn to ensure that it doesn't do it again.
Yeah. But there's two types of insulation. There's the type of insulation that, like, okay, I'm not going to let anybody in, right? I'm going to kind of prideful insulating myself from feeling those things again. But then I think there's a healthy insulation, which I see you modeling as a leader, and that is an insulation of wise counsel and accountability and really, I mean, transparency is a kind of insulation, because it's like you maintain a human factor of yourself as a lead pastor. That's like, you're not untouchable in the sense of being called out or saying I'm learning, which is exactly what you just said. And so I hope that as believers hearing this word on Sunday, who certainly I'm sure there's lots of people carrying that type of baggage from church, that, you know, like you mentioned, it has to come back to, what are we learning from the person and the word of God versus what are we learning from, obviously we can learn from our own stories and all of that. But if we're projecting the image of a leader who has failed or a person who has hurt us onto what it means to follow Jesus, like, that's not truth and that's not real. But if we want to be more like Christ, we need to look at Christ, not other people.
Yeah. Well, I would say two beliefs, two phrases quotes, I guess, that I kind of model that after is, John Acuff says it this way: unquestionable leaders do unquestionable things. So it's not about not being questioned. It's not about a lack of accountability. Accountability is your saving grace. Because if you are unaccountable, you are going to do unquestionable things. That's just the truth. But the other side of it is that we have to dictate in each of us, not just Kyle the lead pastor, but each of us, we have to dictate who gets to be the umpire in our life, or the strike zone's always going to change. Yeah. So for me, you know, I have my elders, and again, they're congregationally appointed elders who I choose to submit to them, and they can ask me anything. They have priority in my life. They have the right to inspect every digital device, every correspondence. I mean, they have full access. And whatever they ask, I will answer, no matter what. I'm going to just try to commit to that. But there's not a lot of other people in my life that have that access. Right. Because everyone has an opinion. I'm going to spend, now I say this facetiously. I don't say this seriously. But I could spend all of eternity talking to people about what I should have done or how I should have done it based on their preferences. But that doesn't matter. Because all I have is here and now, and there's urgency. Yeah. I mean, again, it goes back to the sermon on Sunday. Come before winter. Man, how you behave when your back's up against the wall, how you behave when you think eternity's at stake is different than, you know, we got time to work it out. I don't have time to work it out. I have time to make a difference, because every day is a day closer to someone heading to either hell or heaven. And I want to do everything in my power to get them to heaven. Yeah. Man, for someone listening to this, obviously we're kind of approaching this from a church ministry perspective, but like, for anybody listening and the takeaway from the message of who is the umpire in your life, right? And that being a privileged space of accountability, what are you accountable to? And I mean, these are all principles that we need to set and make a priority for each one of us, because if not, then there is neglect, there is drift, there is
our own lenses. You talked about that with the Coke can, right? We begin to see things a very specific way instead of someone from an outside perspective who genuinely cares about our life to go, wait a second, like you're playing a victim card here that you're not actually, or vice versa, right? You need to take a little bit more for yourself instead of just being pouring out so much. Yeah, that accountability really helps us have stability.
Well, and yeah, the stability aspect is, I don't know, that's the right word. I just sometimes wonder if stability is enough for us. We want a conflict-less world, not a stable world. And the absence of conflict is not health. You know, not everyone's perfect. I mean, that's the crazy thing is I don't want to pretend to be perfect. In fact, I want to tell you I'm not perfect. I'm going to tell you that I am going to fail you, just as you're going to fail me, and everyone who's listening is going to fail someone. But can we endure the conflict of sharing that hurt, sharing that pain, sharing how that made me feel or how that made you feel, so that we can learn from it and actually become better, not just a better person, not just a better relationship, but a better expression of the church modeled after unity. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. I read this passage in 2 Timothy where it's Paul's kind of last words before he's beheaded. If you missed Sunday, you should go listen to it. But Paul talks about Alex, the coppersmith, who, did him wrong. But I love that in some ways, Paul is matter of fact. He's truth telling about it. Hey, he did me wrong. But then he removes the judgment. The Lord is going to handle that, not me. The Lord, it's like he released that burden to the Lord. And the truth is no longer the problem. And he's warning Timothy, hey, this town that you're probably going to have to route through, you need to be careful, because if this person was trying to hurt me as a disciple of mine, as someone who's picking up the mantle for me, continuing my vision or the vision that the Lord gave us to have a healthy expression of this thing called church, this guy's going to be out for you too. Watch out for him. It wasn't watch out to avoid him, or I don't know. This was a personal letter that we almost have exposure to on a whole nother level. It wasn't a public declaration or a public gossip. It was Paul encouraging his young disciple, watch out for this guy.
Right.
Because I don't want the same things to happen to you.
Well, even just the come before winter, which is the nucleus of the message, if you were to give it a title, right? Like this come before winter, which is the whole point of the letter. Like you can see Paul writing almost adding that at the end, because he was shipwrecked because they tried to transport him to Rome, like, and beat the season, as you might say, and couldn't. And then they got, stranded. And so I'm sure that's like a dad going like, hey, don't forget to check your oil or check your tires. Like,
yeah.
Like come before winter, see that doesn't happen to you. And man, I can even say from my adult life, how many things you wonder, like as a family, you end up like, oh, our family did this way. And then you experience like, well, let's challenge that in some ways. And you figure out, oh, that's why we did it that way. It's because we didn't want to get stranded on some desert, some island, because they had that happen to them before or something. So we learned at each other's expense for sure.
G.K. Chesterton, he has this thing, it's called The Fence. And he paints a story about, farmer goes in, he's like, why is this fence here? And so you just naturally take down the fence. And Chesterton would say, no, you need to ask as many questions as possible, because something happened. No one just puts up a fence in the middle of a field for no reason.
Right.
There's a reason that there's here. And so to ask those questions, understand why did this come to pass to be what it is? And I think that's important of the church world, because we're constantly on a pendulum. We have a really good experience. And so we do everything we can to mirror whatever the context of that good experience is and hit repeat as many time. Well, when we have a bad experience, we do everything. We swing so hard the other way. We're like, I'm going to avoid any appearance of that, feeling that thing, because we want to not feel that pain. We don't want that discomfort anymore. But the reality is it's the middle. You need both the grace that comes from knowing the truth and the pain and healing that comes from knowing the truth, because it's like surgery, the truth cuts deep, but it heals whole. And that's what gets us to the place that I think God desires us to be, or the church needs us to be. I think that's the big one. The church needs us to be.
Right.
And that's really what Matt kind of talked about last week, in that degree of showing up authentic, showing up real, because when you're real, then God can actually work with you. You're pliable.
Yeah.
You become the person that he can begin to mend and bring back and heal. But when you show up as a fake version of yourself or a marred version of yourself, it's just a masquerade. It's just let's play pretend.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help anyone.
Man, yeah. What else from Sunday? You had mentioned you kind of get into that jaded side of the story with Paul.
Well, I think we've all been hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, every one of us has been hurt. And my question and my challenge for myself, and I guess for you listening, is you really have to always check yourself before you wreck yourself. Because if you become so jaded and your armor becomes, I'm not going to let anyone in, I'm not going to let anyone close. If you become so leery and suspicious of people, then you're going to forget that not only is growing spiritually your burden, but the only way to win at that, the only way to succeed at that, is to do that inside of vulnerability and community. And if you cut out the community because that's what hurt you, you'll never grow. Mm-hmm. You'll never develop spiritually. And so you can't choose the jaded path. You have to choose the grief work that you have to walk through. And every once in a while you have to check yourself, like, hey, am I carrying this the right way?
Right.
Is my past hurt being projected on my future self?
How would you had somebody, an organization, one of the organizations you work for, kind of call you out on that. I don't know that probably you would have asked yourself that question if it wasn't asked at you. So maybe like a word on, obviously people can ask that for themselves where they're sitting right now, but like, where do you even begin to kind of inspect some of that for yourself? Community, obviously, which is one, but.
Well, these leaders that did this, one, I respect them, love them, cherish them because they did it. It would have been easy to fire me. It would have been easy to transition me. It would have been even easier to ignore it in me and just let myself crash. But they chose at their own inconvenience, their own organizational timeline, their own expense of stewarding the dollars of the church to go, he's not ready. And we think he can't be ready, but he's got to deal with this with Jesus. And so they did three things. One, they confronted it. And they took me out of the spotlight. They took me out of the ministry. So I actually became a janitor, which was hilarious because I really
at that organization.
They're like, I was a campus pastor, senior leader, and they're like, we're going to pay you your same salary, but you're just going to be a janitor. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah. And of course, your pride, what? I can't do that. But I will tell you, after the first week of shampooing carpets for an entire week, I was like, I think I missed my calling. I want to be a janitor. Now, why? Was because no one was talking to me. I couldn't hide behind everyone else's chaos. When you're cleaning carpet, all you hear is your own chaos.
Yeah.
And I had to deal with that. Now, I was a janitor. Then they put me in intentional, I would say counseling, but I would tell you it wasn't really counseling. Not that I'm anti-counseling, but it was more discipleship. It was someone who going, hey, look at your life through the lens of a biblical model, not just your hurt. And are you going to grow up? And so I met with that person for, I think it was 12 sessions. And then the third thing is they sent me on a missions trip. And that was, again, I don't know if that was by design or by God's grace, meaning it was a pre-described missions trip. It was already in motion. It was kind of like we had to do what we had to do. But in that missions trip, when you had to serve someone else, and this is what I said on Sunday, it's crazy how little your problems seem when you realize how big someone else's are.
Yeah.
And again, just that combination, really what that did is it forced me to sit at the foot of the cross and understand my identity is not in what I was, not what happened to me, not my stage or the platform I have or the title I have. My identity is not in my job title or the work of my job. My identity is in him. And if I can't become okay with my identity being in him, then every lens is going to be through my own accord. and I'm going to work for my own glory, my own pleasure. I'm going to have relationships, and I'm just going to stay jaded. And so they let me walk through that, and it lasts 3 months. I mean, I did nothing for 3 months. And then I remember the callback. I remember, hey, we want you to do this. And I kind of moved from janitor to the lead pastor's assistant and just doing some light projects. And I remember him going, hey, you can't stay my assistant forever. And it crushed me. I was like, yeah, what do you mean? I want to. This is awesome. I love this job. He's like, no, you would be the most highly paid assistant in the world. And that's not good stewardship. You're going to have to go back out on your own. Are you ready? And then I just remember the one conversation. He's like, I'm going to put you back in. But here's the deal. You got to win. And if you don't win, we got to cut ties. And he put me back in. And I'll tell you, man, it was the best run in ministry of my life. It was so much fun.
Wow.
And kind of am where I am today because of that rebuild, what's the word? Restoration.
Right. And I was just so kind of a takeaway, and I think this is kind of a summary of where we're at with this series, with this message, kind of unpacking that as a little bit of a model, and it's not going to be true for everybody, but I think it can give us a little bit of a practicality. Was you had people who genuinely were straight with you, who spoke in your life, but you trusted their opinion. So we have to have that type of community around us. And if you don't prayerfully consider it, obviously being involved in the local church, specifically here at Friends, like get involved, put yourself around other people first. If you don't even have that, pray about it, but put yourself in an environment where you can even begin to cultivate those type of trusted community, which is built over time. So obviously this isn't a quick fix. Nothing's a quick fix here. But 2, you then had margin to process that with yourself. And if we're running all the time and we do not give ourselves the margin of simplicity in order to seek the Lord in prayer and seek the Lord in just listening and being real about our situation, then we're never going to take the time to really process that well. So there was community, the authenticity there with that relationships, margin, and then rebuild. It wasn't just jump back in. It was affirmation. It was small steps. It was, things that you could win on. But yeah, it was also measured. It was like, hey, here's some things that are given to you, responsibility that's given to you that you can succeed in. But if you don't, that's your choice in some ways. And then set loose. We have to be willing to go back and be vulnerable again and step out of our comfort zone back into whatever that next season of life that you're taking. So I just want to wrap up with Jesus's words, the Lord's words to Paul. And this is, Paul is in prison. That's what we're talking about, this letter to Timothy. But he's in prison because of a situation that happened in Jerusalem where he was beaten. He was thrown in prison because he was trying to testify what God has done by his own people. And it said, after all this happened, this is verse 11 of chapter 23 of Acts. So the following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage." And I think it takes courage for us to be authentic, vulnerable, and in community, especially if we've been jaded, especially if we've had church hurt. And so whatever that next season is for you, whatever that next season is for us, stepping into the holidays and the new year, take courage because the Lord is with us. So we hope you enjoyed this podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this, not just this one, but these podcasts so far. We're going to be back in January with 2025 season 2 of What We Couldn't Say on Sunday. So we hope you have a great holiday season, Christmas celebration, and we look forward to you joining us again soon. Thanks for joining us today on What We Couldn't Say on Sunday. We hope this podcast helps you dive deeper into God's Word and possibly answered some questions that you may have had from Sunday's message. Don't forget to check out the study guide linked in the show notes. For more information about Friends Church and all that is happening here, check out our website, whfriends.org. We hope to see you this weekend as we keep going on the series, Welcome to the Jungle. See you next time.